Hey everyone, so I just wanted to quickly, I don't know how quickly it'll be actually, I just wanted to explain what happened as far as my labor and delivery. So yesterday I took Midwives Brew. It was around like 5 o'clock p.m. I made the Midwives Brew. I had made a few adjustments. I did the same amount of castor oil. The adjustments that I made is I had to use the mango juice instead of the apricot juice because I couldn't find it anywhere. I went to like 5 different stores, could not find it anywhere. I also added an extra scoop of almond butter just because I love almond butter. So instead of 2 tablespoons, I added 3. And the drink wasn't bad at all. I actually liked it. It's something that I would probably drink again, minus the castor oil because I don't need that. But yeah, it was really good. Sorry for the shaking, by the way. I'm just holding this in my hand. Anyways, so I drank the Midwives Brew after I'd gotten the okay from my OBGYN. And yesterday I was 37 weeks and 3 days. Yes, that is early, but it is considered full term. My OB was not concerned with me taking the Midwives Brew because, for one, I got steroid shots when I was around 32 weeks pregnant to develop her lungs because I'd been going in and out of preterm labor. And so, like, I guess the one concern an OBGYN would have is just that the baby's lungs aren't fully matured or developed until 39 weeks. So that's why your midwife may tell you 37 weeks is too soon or too early to try the Midwives Brew. For me, I was allowed to try the Midwives Brew. At this point, I was already dilated to 3.5 centimeters as well, so I think that contributed to it. So I got the green light to try the Midwives Brew, and I drank it. I had no problem drinking it. I downed it in like less than 5 minutes, honestly. And then within the first 10 minutes, I started feeling contractions. I just kind of kept an eye on it. I made dinner and I cleaned up and I made sure everything was in order. Then I got my daughter ready for bed, gave her a bath, all that kind of stuff. We read a book. And so we were just having a relaxing evening and I was paying attention to my contractions. I also bounced on a medicine ball for a bit, but contractions were getting painful. I would say by the first hour in, they were starting to get painful, like uncomfortable. So that was by 6. By 7, they were still consistent. They were getting stronger. They were getting closer together. By 7, I had actually texted my mom and I was like, hey mom, I think I need to go to the hospital tonight because these contractions are only progressing. But I also told her that I would try taking a warm bath and see if that helped at all. I wasn't dehydrated, which I know can cause contractions, so I knew that wasn't a factor or anything that I needed to be worried about. So at this point, after I got my daughter in bed and everything, I went and took a warm bath. When I was in the bath, I was having contraction after contraction, and I was also timing my contractions. And so with timing them, when I started timing them, my contractions were about, I would say 5 minutes apart. But like by the time I was taking a bath, they were 1 to 3 minutes apart, and the bath did not help whatsoever. And so by this time, I believe it was about 8:30, and again, my contractions were very strong. I was actually having to kind of like breathe through them. I was actually in pain. That was pretty new because with the contractions that I've been having over the past month, they weren't all that painful. Like, yeah, a little bit uncomfortable. My stomach would get super hard into this knot, but it wasn't painful like a period cramp. And another thing is, one nurse told me when I came into triage one time, you know the feeling when you're in real labor when you're cramping and it kind of like goes down your legs. So like here's your pelvic area and you feel cramps and they kind of like reach down your thigh, like the top of your thigh, that kind of like aches. And so that is exactly what I was feeling, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think this is the real deal. So I waited until about 9 o'clock after I had gotten my daughter to bed, and then my mom came over to stay with her while I went to the hospital, which was half an hour away. And so I went to hospital, labor and delivery, the triage center, and at this point I was having very painful contractions. I would rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 about a 7, and I have a high pain tolerance, so this was pretty uncomfortable at this point. So they kept me on the monitor for a while and saw all the contractions. They were literally going all the way up to the top of that graph thing that they record the baby's heartbeat and your contractions on. And after about 20-30 minutes, they checked me, or maybe they checked me right when I got in. I can't remember exactly, but they either checked me right when I got in, or they checked me about 20 to 30 minutes in, and I was, what was I dilated to? I think I was dilated to a 4. Oh, and so I had my OBGYN appointment that same day in the morning, and that's when I was dilated to a 3.5. So I dilated 0.5 centimeter all day. They were like, at least there was some progression, so they gave me the option to walk the halls. So for an hour, I walked around in this loop during all the contractions. I kept walking through all the contractions, and then I got on the monitor again. I got to the hospital around 9:30, so around 10:30 is when I got back into the bed after walking for an hour. And so I got back into the bed, they put me back on the monitors, and they checked me again. Nothing had changed. They still saw I was having contractions about every 2 to 3 minutes. Very, very, very painful, but no change in my cervix. So they gave me the option to again walk the halls, and this was after I was on the monitor for a while, and I was in bed until I was in bed until 12:30. So I was in bed for 2 hours, and no progression but very strong contractions. So once again, they gave me the option to walk another hour, so I did. I walked another hour, and I had to keep stopping every time I was having a contraction. It was very uncomfortable, but I did walk for an hour. At that point, it was 1:30 in the morning, and I got back into my room. They put me back on the monitors, checked my cervix again, and I was still a 4, but my contractions were so painful and so intense. My doctor was kind of at a point where she didn't really know what to do, because she had ordered me to be sent home, and I was saying I cannot go home. Like, I cannot drive with these contractions. Something is wrong. Like, I know my body, and this is not fake labor. And the nurse and everyone just kept explaining, well, real labor is, yes, you have contractions, but it has to be changing your cervix. And I hadn't changed in hours and hours and hours, even though I was having these very intense contractions. And so they wanted to send me home. I was honestly arguing, not necessarily like being disrespectful or like yelling or anything like that, but I was advocating for myself and standing up for myself and just expressing that I could not go home like this. And I wasn't comfortable. My mom had advised me not to leave. I just knew in my heart that I should not go home. And so they offered to give me an Ambien, which is a sedative, and I did not accept that because I don't need a sedative, and plus I had to drive 30 minutes home. It just didn't seem right, and I asked how it would help with the contractions, and they said it wouldn't. It would just help me fall asleep, hopefully, and it just didn't seem to be like addressing the actual issue. Like, my contractions were so painful. What I would relate them to is when your water breaks, those contractions, which feels like 10 months worth of period cramps, all those period cramps you missed, the 10 months you were pregnant, all at once, every couple of minutes. And it was excruciating. So a different on-call doctor, because my doctor had went home for the night after she had delivered some patients' babies, another on-call doctor decided to keep me because of my contractions. And there were also 2 parts on the strip in which they were doing a non-stress test that seemed a little bit concerning to them, just having to do with baby. So They decided to keep me, thank the Lord, because I was not going to leave. You guys, I would not have signed my discharge papers. I would not have left. I would have went like to the emergency room in that same hospital if I needed to, because I just knew, and I could not leave. So then I'm trying to think about like the timeline as far as what time it was. I think it was around 3 o'clock. They gave me some IV pain medicine to help with the contractions, and I was finally able to fall asleep for a few hours. Then I woke up again, and again I was in a lot of pain. The contractions were back, and so they checked my cervix, and I was actually a 4.5, 5 centimeters dilated. So at this point they decided to keep me. The nurse had told me that if my cervix had not changed, then I was going to be sent home in the morning. And just, I'm so glad that it did change, because with the amount of contractions I was having and how painful they were, I knew it was real labor and I could not go home. So my cervix had changed a bit, so they decided to keep me. I said I would try out the medicine ball to bounce on that and whatnot. So I started bouncing on the medicine ball around, I'm gonna say 7:30. I think like 7:30 in the morning I was bouncing on the medicine ball. Around 8 o'clock they gave me some more of the IV pain medication, and this time it did not help with the contractions whatsoever. And so that was kind of like a red flag to me, because the first time I took it, it took the pain away from the contractions. I was still feeling the contractions, but it was more just like a tightening sensation as opposed to being in excruciating pain, feeling these period cramps. So I kept bouncing on the ball. I tried to give it time. I didn't know. I didn't want to seem like I was complaining or anything, and like I was just nagging at everything. So I did just try to suck it up and just keep bouncing on the ball, because they said I hadn't progressed and blah blah blah. And so there was a point where I started having these contractions, and I was having to bend over the bed and really try to stay focused and catch my breath. And with these contractions I was also starting to feel pain in my pelvis, like this sharp, kind of like a sharp shooting or a sharp stabbing pain down there in my pelvic region. So I called the nurse in. She said that she would check me. She checked me. I was 8 centimeters dilated. And you guys, I was just like, oh my gosh, because I knew that these contractions were so painful, and I was just trying to breathe through them. They're like, oh, you're not really changing much, you're slowly progressing, all night long, and all this stuff. And I'd only dilated 0.5 centimeter to 1 centimeter more by the morning. So I thought, you know what, this pain is just, it's a part of it. And I never in a million years would have imagined that I would have been at 8 centimeters dilated. I was still in the triage unit at this point, you guys. They hadn't even admitted me to the hospital, because they were just, they're like, well, we'll see how things go if you actually progress. And so, like I said, she checked me. She was like, oh, wow, well, you're an 8. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this is why the contractions are so painful. And I was like, I need the epidural. I need it right now. I don't want to miss the epidural. And so all of a sudden, all these nurses started scrambling, and they got me into my labor and delivery room. And then the anesthesiologist, she was awesome. Her last name was Moran. I can't remember her first name, but I thought that was so cool, because there's actually a YouTuber that I watch, and her YouTube channel is called The Moran Family. And so it just automatically reminded me of her, but I can't remember her first name, but she was anesthesiologist Moran. And she came in within a minute of me being in the room, and automatically started, doing all the stuff that she needed to do. Prepping my back, getting all the supplies out, doing everything as fast as she could, because I was having such painful contractions and things were progressing really quickly. And at this point, my mom wasn't even there at the hospital with me. She had taken my daughter to school. That was at 8. She had taken her to school. And I would say this was maybe like 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock that all this craziness was happening and unfolding. So my mom wasn't there. No one was there. It was just me going through this craziness and such bad contractions. And anyways, the anesthesiologist gave me the epidural. Everything went fine the first time. It wasn't painful. It didn't really bother me because the contractions are what were killing me. So, especially being that far along into my labor, because I've never went naturally into labor that far. With both my other pregnancies and deliveries, my daughter, I had got my epidural when I was about 4 centimeters dilated when I went in, and with my son, I went in at 5 centimeters dilated before I was actually in active labor, and so I got the epidural again, like pretty much right as soon as I got to my hospital room. So, you guys, I was laboring hard all night long, and then in the early morning hours, and so by 9 o'clock, like my body, I felt like it was shutting down with how painful these contractions were. So I got the epidural, and I'm guessing I was like a 9 or a 10 at this point because I was in excruciating pain. And I was feeling the baby's head. I was like, I feel like I need to pee. I feel pressure. Like, there's a lot going on down there, and it hurts. The contractions hurt more than anything else. Anything else you can imagine. Nothing else hurt that bad. And so this epidural, I was like, how long is this gonna take to kick in? I really can't keep doing this. This is so painful. What else can I have? And they're like, you can't have anything else. And oh, also my OB was at the doctor's office, which was about 20 minutes away. So they had called her. She's literally flying down the freeway to get to me. She did get there in time, thank goodness. Yeah, so I'm just like trying to hang on. I was like, why isn't this epidural working? I can't, it's not numbing. Like, I'm still feeling all these contractions. I'm gonna die. It's awful. And the anesthesiologist said it takes about 15 minutes for it to kick in. She even put an extra shot of it in. It's like a drip of the epidural typically. And so she had put this additional like syringe thing of the epidural medicine into I don't know, it's kind of like an IV, but it's in your spine. So she did that. I was on the epidural drip, and then you can press a button to make the medicine release and like give you more if you need it. So she gave me that and whatnot. I kept pressing that button. The nurses kept pressing that button. You know, everyone was pressing the button to try to get myself numb. And it did take, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes for me to be completely numb. First it was my left leg that went numb, and then it was my right leg. But it was like everything on my right side I could feel, and it was the sharpest stabbing pain, and it was just unbearable. I wasn't screaming or anything, but I was like gripping onto the bed for dear life. And when the nurses would like try to talk to me or literally do anything, touch me, do anything around me, I was like, please don't touch me, don't talk to me, you know, just give me a minute, you know. So I would have to breathe through these contractions, and I would say, yeah, like, this hurts really bad, but I was not crying, I was not screaming, I was just literally trying to breathe through them and knowing that, you know, this contraction is almost halfway over. Okay, it's halfway over. Okay, it's 3/4 of the way over. Okay, it's ending. And so I was just holding on to those moments where I had peace and my body wasn't contracting, whether it was just a minute or 2 minutes, whatever. I was just holding on to those moments where I was not in excruciating pain. And so about, like I said, 15 minutes or so after I got that epidural, I was finally numb. My doctor finally got there. My mom still wasn't there either, but she was on her way. She did get there in time before the birth, thank goodness. Unfortunately, my daughter's father could not be there because he had actually planned to come up not this weekend, but next weekend, because that's when we were assuming that she would make her arrival by. And so he was actually flying on a plane to a different state for a wedding, so he was not able to be there for her birth, and that's fine. I know he'll still come see her. He'll come see her soon, but it was a little bit, you know, I would have loved for him to be there, but at the same time, I'm not upset. Like, I'm not focused on that whatsoever. Like, I was focusing on myself, my baby, and that's really all that mattered to me. So when my doctor got there, they checked me again, and I was a 10. And by the way, my water never broke. This whole time my water had never broken. But the contractions, what I would compare it to is when your water is broken. Those contractions are insane. I would say they match the contractions that you feel in very late active labor, when you're about 7, 8, 9, 10 centimeters dilated and you are feeling it. Like, those contractions, I don't even know how to explain it to you guys. Like, if you've been through labor, then you know, but it's unreal. It's insane what us women can go through and what our bodies do. It's mind-blowing. But yeah, so I was 10 centimeters dilated. My bag was bulging, so at that point my OB/GYN did pop my water, and then from there we just waited for a contraction. I really couldn't feel much of anything at this point from all the times me and the nurses were pressing that epidural button, and just like it had all kicked in finally. So I really couldn't feel too much. We waited maybe like 5 minutes, if that, and then I had actually felt a contraction coming. It felt more like the baby being pushed down. Like, I wasn't even pushing at this point, but I felt her head coming down. And so my OB was like, oh, yep, there she is. And so I literally did about half of a push, not even a full push, because I had felt like my daughter was coming out pretty much, and I hadn't pushed. It was just from the contraction. And so I gave half of a push, and then my OB told me to stop. She didn't want me to tear, so she gently helped guide baby girl out, and yeah, she was born within a minute. So it was a very, very crazy day. It is still the same day. I had my baby girl this morning. She is currently over here. I will show you guys her in a minute, but I just wanted to share my story with you guys while it was still fresh in my mind. I don't think I'll ever forget that or any details of it, but I did want to share with you guys. So yeah, I pushed half a push for her and she came out, and it was just crazy to me how nothing had progressed all night long. I was still at a 4 all night long, and then I was checked in the morning and I was at 4.5 to 5 centimeters. And it didn't really seem like anyone really believed in me that my contractions would change anything, but they definitely did. And I just can't believe I went from 4.5 to 5 to an 8, and it was like within 2 hours, if that. So it was crazy. It was a crazy day, and those contractions are the most painful, crazy things I've ever felt in my whole life. But I would do it all over again for my daughter. She is amazing. She's precious. She is everything and more than I ever could have imagined. She is my everything. So I'm going to show you guys her now, and then we'll call it a video. Oh, and also one more thing I wanted to tell you guys. When she was born, she had this like spiral umbilical cord, and I've never seen that in my life. With both my other kids, they were both just like a straight umbilical cord. And even my doctor, after my daughter was born, was like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. She's like, this is beautiful. And I had no clue what she was talking about. Like, she even had showed the nurses. I didn't really know what she was talking about because I was paying attention to my daughter. But when I saw the pictures that my mom took and I saw her umbilical cord, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So if I can, I'll insert that picture here. So I don't want this to be too bright for her, But you guys, here is my little princess. She was born at 6 pounds 10 ounces. And she is 20 inches long. She's a really long little girl, and I don't want to bother her too much, but look at this head of hair. She's just so precious. So I will definitely share more with you guys in the upcoming days, weeks, etc. But I'm gonna let her sleep right now, and I need to get some rest too. So I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys soon. Bye, guys.